Hi everyone, Mike Mal here. Well, it's been exactly 10 years since I made my last quasi-documentary, Why I No Longer Believe in God. And incidentally, you don't need to see that one first to understand this one. It stands alone, and if there's any missing context, I'll fill you in. When I began to document my spiritual awakening, as I called it, I was just introducing myself to media software. So I really appreciate you guys watching and supporting my video, even though I was very much a novice. I mean, I had no idea what I was doing. I don't even get the monetization from that video because Genius over here used a copyrighted song. Unbelievable. But despite the glitches and the fact that it is broadcast in very, very low resolution, I still received to date 1.3 million views. The first million was in the first 18 months. Then the copyright strikes came. I gained thousands of subscribers and made connections with people all over the world through the comment section. And so, I would like to take this moment right here in the very beginning of this video to personally thank you all for your support with so many heartfelt and endearing comments. I really can't express properly how all your words of encouragement have uplifted me. It's very humbling to receive so much inspiration from people all around the world that I haven't even met. It is a testament to the natural and inherent goodness of humanity. Now, as of the making of this video, I have over 30,000 comments, so if I never replied to yours personally, I apologize. There's too many to keep up. But rest assured, your words of understanding and your own stories of your personal lives and your own deconversion stories that are similar to mine, they've all brought me a lot of smiles and tears. I mean, sometimes when I'm feeling down, I'll actually go to the comment section and read what others wrote. So, once again, folks, sincerely, thank you. The glitches in the movie weren't even the biggest complaint I got, at least not from my friends and family anyway. The biggest complaint I got from them was, "Hey man, I can hear your voice, see your pictures, but I can't see you." I couldn't believe how many people told me that. So, here I am. 10 years older and more than 20 COVID pounds heavier. But it's okay, my wife says I'm better looking than ever. So many people have asked me, what's different today compared to 10 years ago when you originally made the movie? Well, I'm still a non-believer, but I'd be lying if I said my life was the same. My life is indeed very different today. I have remarried to my soulmate, and my son is now a 19-year-old man, a wonderful boy, who runs, believe it or not, a successful YouTube channel. He plays video games and commentates on them. And they give him money for this. As a non-believer, I feel free in my mind, yes. But I must admit that from time to time, I still feel a sense of loss about the promises religion made to me over the better part of my life. Namely, the afterlife filled with lost friends, lost family, and of course, my beloved animals who crossed the Rainbow Bridge. At the time of making that video, I was someone who just learned and subsequently accepted that there's no God. But I have to admit, I was a little bit angry. Angry for being duped for so many years of my life. Duped into thinking that one day I would see my lost loved ones again. Angry that I was duped into thinking I'd meet my great uncle, who was a church composer, and talk to him about his life of music. Angry that I'll never cuddle my beloved Achilles ever again. Angry for being duped that I would see my mother again. But as things are, there's no one to blame for that deception. No one to direct that anger towards. My parents, teachers, church leaders, friends, family, they were all deceived just like I was, as were their parents, their church leaders, and so on. They all thought they were doing the right thing, because they too are all bamboozled into believing that they can cheat death. A promise that no one can deliver. Well, today I'm pretty much over all that anger. I've learned to accept the fate of imminent death and embrace the joys of life right now. I do actually desire to be more active in this, and I'll get into that more at the end of the video. But a truly big difference today is I know myself much better. I know my place in this world and my life's meaning and purpose as much as any human can. Essentially, I know who I am. So, who am I? When dealing with the topics of religion and quote-unquote spirituality, I don't first identify as an atheist. I first and foremost identify as a humanist. Humanism, for those of you that might not know, is a worldview or philosophical school of thought that emphasizes the value, agency, and dignity of all human beings unconditionally. It is a belief system that focuses on human potential, ethical reasoning, and the importance of critical thinking, and most importantly, in my opinion, compassion when addressing the challenges of the world. Also importantly, humanists reject the concept of supernatural forces, including deities, and instead promote the idea that humans can live meaningful and ethical lives through reason and empathy towards each other and our world. The second moniker I identify with when discussing religion and spirituality is still not atheist. Atheist comes in third. In second place comes being a skeptic. Over the last 10 years, you could say I've become one bona fide skeptic. A skeptic, by definition, is a person who questions the validity or authenticity of something purported to be factual. A skeptic is someone who maintains a doubting attitude until and if sufficient evidence is presented to warrant belief. Personally, I think this is the best way to guide yourself through life. The best way to know what is true. When you think about it, what exactly are facts anyway? I mean, for a lot of people, this seems to completely elude them. Look in any dictionary, and the definition is quite simple. In a nutshell, facts are claims that can be proven with objectively verifiable evidence. So therefore, if you believe without evidence something outstandingly nonsensical, such as, for example, the deep state is spraying us with chemicals by means of airplane trails, or that the Democratic Party is actually a satanic cabal that drink the blood of frightened little children to stay young, well, see, I'm just not going to believe you. If there's no objectively verifiable evidence, it's not a fact. And as I said, in third place, I am an atheist, someone who hasn't been convinced that any gods exist. I'm very comfortable identifying myself in this way. Living your life in this order, I believe, means you'll always be loving and always be skeptical. That's something the world needs more of. We should all strive to be more loving and more skeptical. I personally have never felt more secure in myself, never felt more comfortable in my own skin than I have since accepting reality, and I'm literally happier than I've ever been in my entire life. For real, I don't know how to prove that to you guys, so you're just going to have to take my word for it. And upon deconversion, I applied critical thinking to anything and everything out there. And let me tell you, as a result, I'm one very different person today. I had radical changes in so many areas of my life. Radical changes on so many issues. On social issues, how to raise our children, how we should take care of our society. I've radically changed myself socially and politically too. Politically, I did an about-face. In almost every way, I've changed. And things that the Bible taught me were an abomination. For example, I don't know, just off the top of my head, homosexuality, I now viewed with an open mind and an open heart. Suddenly, all humans were just that, humans. My natural self started to come out. I suddenly realized I never hated anyone. I only wanted to, because I was taught that they were an abomination to God. But my heart, in its natural state, was blind to all things superficial. My heart would seek to accept and connect with everyone without condition. It amazed me how religion can hijack someone's personality like that. On a side note, I personally will never understand how anyone can judge anybody for their morality. That's nobody's business, and if you believe in God, then you know that He'll take care of the situation at His time and fairly. God doesn't need me or you to be His morality police here on earth. If, for example, a woman needs an abortion, this is usually a very troubling and torturesome experience. It's a very difficult and very personal journey. A journey that most would rather not take. I'll never understand how someone at this point feels they have the right to interfere with this woman's life and make her journey that much more difficult. As I said a moment ago, we should all strive to be more loving and more skeptical. While I'm no longer conflicted today, if I look back on my life, I do remember the struggles I had. It's a hell of a tough thing to accept that your faith is wrong, or that God doesn't exist after you believed all your life. Sort of like that example that atheist activist Matt Dillahunty always uses. If you were told from your childhood that when you turn 25 you will inherit $1 billion, and then when you actually turn 25, after years of anxious anticipation for a thrilling and overwhelmingly exciting life for you and everyone you care about, you found out that it was just a sick joke. Now that would be tough. But it can be so much worse, losing your religion. And for those of you that weren't that meshed up in your faith, you need to understand that it really is that bad for so many people. Additionally, for most people, as it was for me, their faith is much more than what they believe. It's also their way of life. Most people become very intertwined socially with their church. Sure, they go to church on Sunday or Saturdays, but they also get together on other days of the week with fellow church members for things like Bible study, followed by board game night. I sure remember all the fun-filled events we would have as a church family. Camping trips, barbecues, kids' play dates, gym night for sports, pizza parties, and yeah, board game night. One of the really cool cultures of the Seventh-day Adventist Church that I was a part of is that after church, you never eat alone. If you don't have anyone to eat with, you will be invited by someone. And I have to admit, I miss that a lot. We were so much more than church congregants. We were a family. I remember when I was 6 years old and my mother died in a tragic jaywalking accident. It was my church family that helped me overcome the grief. When I first started playing the piano as a child, it was my church family that encouraged me to continue. When I became a reckless teenager with no direction in my life, it was my church family and friends that kept me grounded. And when I felt God's calling to become a pastor, it was my church family that supported and prayed for me. Well, it's a nice sentiment anyway. We humans are the most communal species on Earth, and socialization is not to be dismissed because it's so very important to our well-being. To suddenly have that ripped away from our lives is undeniably crushing. It certainly was for me. Truth is, it still pains me to this day. So not only does someone lose their belief in God and eternal life, but they're often devastated by the loss of their lifestyle and often friends and family. I personally know people that have literally been abandoned by their own children because they no longer believe. Incidentally, the beautiful thing again, as I said in my last movie, is that it is quickly overcome. You'd be surprised how fast your family will take you back. And new friends are made, new experiences are shared, and when one emerges from their shell, I promise, you will find a beautiful world and a very beautiful species. My reasons for losing my faith then are a bit different compared to the reasons that I remain without faith now. My questions to theists these days are far simpler than they used to be, though far more thought-provoking, I think. Rather than debating things like whether Noah's big boat could hold the nearly 9 million species on Earth, and then after the flood, how did the marsupials all make it to Australia in one generation? Except, of course, for the opossum. He must have missed a memo or something. And what did the predators eat? Did they have to wait several generations to kill their prey? Well, today my questions are more of a bigger picture thought while being simpler in language. You see, people always ask me, what would it take to convince me that there really is a God? And I always answer truthfully, I don't know. But here's the thing, if the God of the Bible is for real, then he would know exactly what it would take to convince me, and yet he hasn't done a thing. But for the sake of this movie, I'll give it a try. I've narrowed it down to 7 conundrums, over-encompassing questions that need answering. If you can reasonably resolve them, you may be able to convert an atheist. And if you're still a believer, these are some questions I think you should ask yourself. So theists, allow me to present to you Mike Mal's 7 Conundrums of God. My most common question, because it is my particular favorite, is why does something have to die in order for me to live? Whether it's a plant or an animal, some life has to die in order for me to live. And this is true with just about all animals. Why couldn't God give us nutrition and flavor and some kind of savory fruits available everywhere, abundant as weeds? You see, under the premise of evolution by natural selection, this harsh reality, as harsh as it may be, makes perfectly good sense. It ties in seamlessly. Life is recycling itself, one could argue. But if this diversity of life is not due to evolution by natural selection, but rather a loving God, then the question is, why would God create it this way? Why did he go through the trouble to create a complex matrix of food chains and energy distribution that looks so exquisite scientifically, but suffering is always the result? Additionally, the main reason why we eat, yes, there's nutrition, but the predominant reason why we eat is to absorb energy from our energy source, the sun. Yes, we eat to absorb the sun's energy. As we all know, plants absorb the sun's energy through a seemingly magical process known as photosynthesis. And then we eat the plants and absorb the sun's energy. Or we eat the animals that ate the plants and again absorb the sun's energy. Why couldn't God create us and the other animals with the ability to photosynthesize? Why did God specifically create it that life has to kill other life? And don't give me the fallen world thing right now. I mean, humanity sinned, so God decided to what? Create an entire elaborate arrangement of energy distribution through a scientifically alluring and magnificent system that ultimately delivers suffering unless you're at the top of the food chain? That's a bit hard to swallow. So why did God create it this way? Is he a sadist? Well, I'll tell you why, because he didn't. While this all makes sense under the premise of evolution by natural selection, under the premise of a loving God, you have to do spiritual gymnastics in order to make rhyme or reason of this whole concept. Another question I like to ask that I think is of deeper meaning while simpler in language is, how do you know that anything supernatural actually exists? I mean, absolutely not one single event or experience has been shown to be valid upon scrutiny ever. And on top of that, we have no way of testing anything supernatural. And with virtually everyone in the world owning a smartphone, including the developing world, you'd think we'd have some undoctored pictures by now. What about near-death experiences, people always ask me. People claim the most vivid and intimate experiences that they just know were real. Okay, but then the question with near-death experiences is that when you view them from around the world, the visions, or possibly hallucinations, are almost exclusively images of what that person already believes. For example, in North America, most people see Jesus, while in India, most people see Ganesh. Now we know that Christianity and Hinduism can't both be right. So for example, Christianity was right, let's say. Then wouldn't people in India and around the world see Jesus in these supposed visions? Additionally, modern-day brain scans have shown that the same part of the brain lights up when people are having these experiences, regardless of what faith they profess. This is pretty solid evidence that this phenomenon is neurological, not supernatural. For the next question I like to ask, I'd like to tell you a short little story. It's very short, so don't worry. I remember one time I visited the Hare Krishna temple here in Toronto. I was very curious. It's really big and very ornate. The people that work and live there were very kind to us. They gave us a tour. And while touring the place, we accidentally walked into an occupied room. And there in front of me, I saw a man sitting on the floor and crying, weeping like a child. His head was bent down, and as he looked up, I saw he had some kind of white chalky substance, which I know now is called tilak. I don't know Hare Krishna rituals, but he was clearly begging one of his gods for something. We did leave immediately, of course, but right afterwards I thought to myself, what could be troubling him so much? Perhaps he has a family member that's about to pass away. Or maybe he has a child who was just diagnosed with some kind of inoperable illness. Or maybe the love of his life left him, and he desperately wanted to have them back. My heart went out to this man as he practiced his ritual, as I felt It was entirely futile. So that next question is obviously, does prayer really work? And if you think that it does work, then right off the bat I have to ask you, are you saying that God wouldn't have blessed you otherwise? Like if you were praying for someone to beat cancer, say, and they beat it. If you didn't pray, does that mean that God would have just let that person die? If not, then you can't make the assertion that prayer works because God will do whatever he wants anyway. You see, God would have to first not bless you and then bless you upon prayer in order to be able to affirm that prayer is at all effective. And same applies to group prayer. Hey, when I was a Christian, I used to believe in the power of group prayer big time. But then the same questions arise. If group prayer works, and the church is praying for, let's say, a child dying, and she or she beat it, does that mean that God would have not healed that child if there was no group prayer? Or again, is it just that God makes certain that his will be done? And if that's the case, just like I said in my first movie, what was the point of praying in the first place? If God's going to do whatever he wants anyway, then prayer does, well, nothing. Consider this. About 100 years ago, in 1928, in St. Mary's Hospital in London, England, Dr. Alexander Fleming changed the world. He discovered penicillin, antibiotics, and the next 100 years of humanity did in fact radically change. How, you ask? Our life expectancy skyrocketed. It has been estimated that antibiotics have increased the average life expectancy by as much as 20 years. You see, before antibiotic, if you cut yourself with a knife, for example, and it got infected, there was a strong chance that you would die. Today, however, we just pop those annoying horse pills known as antibiotics and we live. But let's consider something even more intimate. Before 1928, if you had a son or daughter that was under 5 years of age, and they acquired, say, a tooth infection or an ear infection, there was a very strong chance that your child would die. In the case of children with a bacterial meningitis infection, 90% died. Now consider the parents of these children that got the ear or tooth infection before 1928. For any of you believers out there that are parents, you will corroborate that when it's for your child's best interest, especially their very life, your prayers are going to be the most earnest and most heartfelt prayers that a human could ever pray. Yet for so many, God didn't listen to their prayers of desperation. The children just died, and the parents were left grieving for the rest of their lives. Now consider after 1928, after antibiotics were discovered, and a child would get that ear or tooth infection. Most parents are still going to pray, although probably with less fervor, but they're still going to pray. Only this time around, it seems that God listens. That leads us to only two possible outcomes in this whole scenario. A, God started to answer prayers for the infected children, ever so coincidentally, at the same time humans discovered antibiotics. Well, that's just silly. Or B, God doesn't answer prayers. In fact, prayer is the only known method that I can think of where we could test the supernatural. And wouldn't you know it, I'm not the only one who's thought of that. There have actually been several scientific, blind, peer-reviewed scientific studies in the area of prayer. What were the results? What actually happened? In all of them, nothing. That's what. Nothing different than that of chance. Another fundamental issue that I never really thought about, but think about it all the time now, is the all too common argument known as the problem with evil. This is an age-old philosophical and theological argument that queries, how can there be a loving God while evil exists? But knowing the whole fallen world argument will get inserted here by apologists, I would like to refine that question a little bit and say more specifically, how can there be a loving God while long-term, high-intensity suffering exists? Some suffering is to be expected, I guess, but an entirely gruesome life? My colleague, former evangelical pastor turned atheist activist John W. Loftus, examines this very question in his book, God and Horrendous Suffering. He questions, how can there be an omni-everything God meaning omnipotent or all-powerful, omniscient or all-knowing, and omnibenevolent or all-loving, while horrendous suffering exists. Perhaps a certain degree of suffering is to be expected, but horrendous suffering? And when we look at animals specifically, again, why the whole kill or be killed system? Animals aren't capable of sin, and they certainly don't have anything to learn from intense suffering, so why would God put this on them? Under the premise of a loving God, it just doesn't make sense. To quote John W. Loftus, the evidential problem of horrendous suffering is one of the most powerful refutations of the theistic God that can be found. I agree wholeheartedly, and I've never heard an apologist successfully explain away this foundational dilemma. It doesn't make sense that a God who knows everything, loves us beyond measure, and is able to do anything, allows for long-term high-intensity suffering to exist. It just makes no sense. If you're interested in viewing this topic in more detail, I strongly recommend you watch John W. Loftus' video about his book, God and Horrendous Suffering. I provided a link in the description. Oh, and by the way, the fancy video work on that project was done by yours truly. A foundational issue that seems to vary on human emotions is the question of what happens to those that are quote-unquote not saved. This is indeed a troublesome topic because seemingly the most common suggestion is the concept of hell. Hell, when applied to the idea of a loving God, is so antithetical, so absurd, and the complete inverse of what a loving being would do, that it is quite literally ridiculous. And compiled on top of that is the paradox of how people can live happily in heaven knowing that some of their loved ones are burning in horror. Apologists say God will wipe away our tears, but then the question I have is, are you still you? I mean, if I was in heaven and my wife, let's say, was burning in unimaginable agony, and God wiped away my tears to the point where I wouldn't even care that she's still burning, I certainly would not be me. Now, there's less emotion in this with other churches like Seventh-day Adventists, as I was raised, because they don't believe in a literal hell. But they do believe in permanent death, which I would argue gives us about the same problem. I mean, I could never be happy in heaven without my son. Could you be happy in heaven without your children? Why does God choose to end these people forever? Wouldn't it have made more sense if God took all these hell-bound naysayers and put them on a separate planet where their reformation can be worked on? Why the need for so much suffering? Again, I have to ask, is God a sadist? If it's true that supposedly loves us more than we could ever love our children, then why or how could he just send us to burn in conscious agony for eternity or kill us forever? It doesn't sound like very deep love to me. I certainly have love for my son, much more than that. A big one for me is the question of the Bible, or any of the big holy books for that matter. You see, it's like this. If God wanted to give us a book of the greatest importance that guides us on how to live our lives, and in the balance lies eternal life or eternal death, or worse, eternal torture, then wouldn't an all-knowing, super-intelligent God that loves us so much would have given us something that is without dispute? Why did God give us a book full of contradictions? I mean, wouldn't a God of exceptional wisdom and exceptional love, knowing that he did not create us, having his wisdom and understanding, at least give us something that is crystal clear with no room for error or interpretation? Does it really make logical sense to you that such a supernatural super being would give us a book that is translated numerous times over from extinct languages, unknown authors, and full of contradictions? Does that sound like a super intelligent God to you? Does it make sense that he gave us a book that condones slavery? Is it logical to you that a loving God gave us a book that says that if your child is overly unruly, you must stone them to death? Does it make sense to you that an all-loving God would give us a book that admonishes us to literally murder homosexuals and to murder witches, an imaginary thing? And for those of you right about now hollering, Old Testament, man, I'd like to first remind you that the Ten Commandments are in the Old Testament. Original sin is in the Old Testament, as is the story of creation, and I can go on and on. You can't cherry pick the Bible. You take it or you don't take it. And as for this New Testament, Old Testament thing, allow me to ask you, what's logical that this marvelously astute God gave us a bunch of immoral, iniquitous, and downright depraved rules, and then later changed his mind? It's evidently clear that the Bible is nothing more than a series of fairy tales written by primitive men in the Bronze Age when they had absolutely no understanding of the universe. Additionally, the New Testament isn't as peachy as Christians will make it out to be. For example, what does the New Testament say about slavery? You don't know? Well, allow me to inform you. 1 Peter 2:18 says, "Slaves, in reverent fear of God, submit yourself to your masters, not only to those who are good and considerate, but also to those who are harsh." But the biggest question I have for theists these days is really a request rather than a question. It's the age-old request by non-believers for, you guessed it, evidence. Now, if you're a theist, you've heard this all the time. And you should hear it all the time because it really is the biggest question that people seem to dismiss all the time. I mean, let's think about this. Here's a good example. Supposing you and I were close friends and I called you on the phone and said, "Hey, I got great news. I adopted a pet." You have no reason not to believe me, so you congratulate me. Then you ask me, what kind of pet did I get? Now consider the following three answers. 1, I tell you I rescued a dog. Dog rescues are very commonplace, and you know how much I love animals, so you wouldn't doubt me. Or number 2, I got a foal, a baby horse. Now, knowing that I live in a busy and bustling city, you'd be very skeptical. Where would you keep it? Where does it run? How would you take care of it? And so on. You'd want some kind of evidence. But if I showed you pictures, let's say, of an equestrian center just down the road from where I live, and I told you I was paying the monthly fees to take care of my horse, you'd probably believe me here too. Or 3, what if I told you I got a baby, fire-breathing dragon? What would it take for you to believe me? Like, for real believe me. For sure you wouldn't accept a picture. You'd say it was AI. For something this fantastic, you're going to want to come over and look and even touch the damn thing yourself, and you probably still wouldn't believe me. Why? Because it's a super fantastic claim. The same applies here. If you're going to prove to us that your God exists, you better be ready with a ton of solid evidence, because remember, you're making a super fantastic claim. Yes, you are. You're telling us with full conviction that this invisible, supernatural super being exists, and that it lives outside the universe, indeed, outside of the space-time continuum altogether, which we don't even know what the heck that means, and it has power so enormous that it can create entire life-sustaining universes from nothing by merely speaking it into existence. And that the super being has also communicated with humans in the past by such bizarre means as a talking burning bush and a talking donkey. You know, when I look back on my life, it is sad. I was literally in my 30s when I finally figured out that donkeys can't speak Hebrew. As human beings, we've been looking up at the stars and wondering what's out there from probably the very beginning of our existence. We looked at the stars and marveled and simply had no idea. When we invented the telescope, we didn't imagine anymore, we could see it. The subsequent improvement in our equipment technology over the years allowed us to see even further and further. And today, we're looking even further with very, very distant telescopes, like the James Webb Super Telescope, 1 million miles into outer space. And with all that looking, we never once found anything at all, that suggests there was a supernatural super being out there. Yet theists claim its existence with solid conviction. So naturally, we could use some evidence. So there you go, religious folk. If you can explain away these 7 conundrums, you may be able to even convert an atheist. If on the other hand you can't explain them away reasonably, then you might want to reconsider your own beliefs. A question I get asked all the time is, what meaning and purpose does your life have without a God? But I think what they really mean to ask, and I don't necessarily mean consciously, but I think they mean to ask from within the deepest and most inner part of their unconscious mind, is what meaning and purpose does your life have without being able to cheat death and live in a utopian dream? That's something we all long for and desire. Can you imagine living in your perfect dream home with the perfect surroundings? Your neighbors are at the perfect distance, and in the neighborhood are all people that you like and care about, and they like and care about you too. No gossip, no backstabbing, no jealousy, no judgment. Only sincere and genuine love for each other. Can you imagine not having to work hard anymore? Having all the time in the world to do whatever it is you desire. Having anything you want, whenever you want it. To walk the streets with absolutely no chance of crime or harassment. To spend truly quality time with your children and family. To play with your animals and to know that your animals will never leave you, not even for a billion years. Now think about this. Under these circumstances, what would we do with ourselves? Really think about this for a moment. My guess is we would desire to grow in knowledge and to find and nurture our hidden talents, or nurture the talents that we already knew we had but didn't pursue. I'm guessing that most of us would eventually learn to play a musical instrument quite well, and the world would be filled with music in abundance where so many of us will play together. Probably sport would become a regularly shared communal activity. We'd expand our mind to learn so much about the universe. Travel the stars, visit new worlds. You see, I believe that most people find meaning and purpose from a God, because to live an eternal life under those particular circumstances, that would bring a tremendous amount of meaning and purpose and satisfaction and contentment. People simply don't want to let go of life after death and the promise of a much better life, because the current life we're living can be so damn hard and so damn unfair. The fact is that if you accept reality, then your life's meaning and purpose is defined by none other than you. You can decide what the purpose of your life is, something big or small, and there's so many ways to fulfill our lives. Helping people, raising our families, pursuing our creative side. Hey, starting a YouTube channel, or just enjoying your life to the fullest. It's your decision. Not some immoral book that condones slavery and tells us to sell our daughters into prostitution for having sex before marriage. And we also make the greatest of meaning and purpose as a human species collectively. Look at all that we've achieved working together. Perhaps one day, generations from now, we'll even achieve that utopia. We've extended life and improved on its quality farther than we ever dreamed possible. And this progress is still continuing, and that at a rapid pace. And all these accomplishments were made are in spite of God. And in my experience, it's always the religious that will negate scientific progress for whatever reason. I have to admit that today, so much more than 10 years ago, when I see people I care about shackled by dogma, it breaks my heart. 10 years ago, I was determined to show everyone there was no God. But today I look at all kinds of believers and even my old friends, and it breaks my heart. You see, since becoming an atheist, as I've said earlier, I've never been more content and never more happy in my whole life. I don't wish this just upon myself and the ones I love, but everybody in the whole world, obviously. Freeing your mind of superstition will allow your natural self to blossom. You will look at the world around you with a very different perspective. For example, when my son was born, I was already an atheist then. I didn't see him how I would have when I was religious, as being born impure, sinful, inherently immoral, and needing some kind of salvation. Rather, I saw him for what he really was, a pure and beautiful human baby, brand new and ready for the challenges of this awe-inspiring universe. You see, life does have meaning and purpose, whether you find that meaning and purpose within yourself or you believe it's delivered by a third party. Either way, it's your life, and as you already know, none of us will have this life for very long. Well, unless science comes up with something soon, but I'm not holding my breath. It is such a short life, such a beautiful one. Do you really want to throw away this fleeting glimpse of the universe in all its magnificent glory because of some desert scribblings from the Bronze Age? When people didn't know the first thing about the universe? In my opinion, humanity is ready to accept reality and drop superstition. Yes, this would be a huge and giant leap in our evolutionary psychology, but I think we're ready. You see, religion was a necessary superstition and helped us survive. I mean, up until the last, 100 years? Life on Earth was so harsh, so bleak, that we needed to believe in some kind of an afterlife, as it helped us carry on. Remember, people would have like 10 children per family, because then maybe 2 would survive into adulthood. To regulate indoor climate, someone had to stay up all night to feed the fire, because if you didn't, some might freeze to death. And sometimes that person would fall asleep and some would freeze to death. Today we just punch a few buttons on our thermostat while in our underwear. The fact is, we have achieved more comfort than our ancestors ever dared dream possible. And today the world has never been more engineered to satisfy our needs and our desires. Look, I know letting go of God can be horribly frightening. I was there. You're continuously haunted by 4 words. What if I'm wrong? Those words used to haunt me like a ghost. Now, one thing you have to trust me is that these feelings of fear and desolation do subside. If you keep reviewing the evidence and keep reminding yourself of things like how ass backwards is hell, then those feelings of despondency will dissipate. It's kind of like when my son was really little. At night, as kids will be, he was afraid of the dark. One time I remember he said he would fantasize that his toys would come to life and harass him. Poor little Jude. I always remind him that these things aren't real, but only products of his young imagination. And he would agree. But, he would say, "It still scares me, Daddy." I would then tell him that whenever he gets scared, to first remind himself that it's not real, and then try really hard to relax, hopefully with your eyes open. Try to embrace the evening. Try to even enjoy the darkness. I know at first this will be very hard and scary, but try to let those feelings go, and I promise if you do this exercise every time you're afraid of the dark, the fear will get smaller and smaller until it simply goes away. He believed me, and it worked. The same thing applies here. When you get these intrusive thoughts that counter common sense and your intelligence, then first apply critical thinking to your feelings. And then afterward, give yourself a chuckle for ever believing it in the first place. The fear will slowly but surely fade into oblivion. If you do this exercise every time you get those feelings of fear, I promise the day will come when those feelings will simply be gone. And I also know and feel how letting go of God can be disruptive and even damaging to someone's life. Some very real questions need answering. What will my friends say? Will they still be my friends? What do I do about our church get-togethers? Do I just stop going? Would they want me there anyway? What about my job? Will they want to fire me at work? Or the big one, what will I tell my kids? There are so many painful hurdles involved in breaking up with your faith that many, some I know personally, will simply stay in their faith and fake it because it's easier than facing the pain. I'd like to borrow something from a fellow atheist activist, Lloyd Evans, and his channel is the Lloyd Evans Channel. In his video, A Believer's Guide to Atheism in 9 Minutes, incidentally, a very good video to help theists truly understand atheists and where we come from. But he brings up a very profound thought that I'd like us to think about right now. What is the probability of you being born? That's a profound thought in my opinion. I mean, how would you even calculate such a thing? For starters, there's about 200 to 300 million sperm in contention with each ejaculate, and there are new sperm made all the time. Then, what are the odds that your parents even found each other at all in this big world, and that they were intimate on that particular night, at that particular hour? And then factor in the same breathtakingly staggering odds for both sets of grandparents, 4 sets of great-grandparents, 8 sets of great-great-grandparents, 16 sets of great-great-great-grandparents, and so on, all the way back to when our ancestors were just single-celled organisms. Now, I'm in no way a trained mathematician or anything like that, but I think it's pretty safe in saying that any way you try to spin this thing, using any supercomputer in the world, no matter how you try to round this thing off, the answer will invariably always be 0. Yes, the probability of you being born is quite literally 0. Yet, here you are, defying those very odds, watching this video right now. Don't you see what happened? You won the cosmic lottery. Your reward? You get to experience the universe consciously. And you get to experience it with so many other cosmic lottery winners. Find solace, joy, and fulfillment in the fact that you get to laugh and cry. You get to taste the many flavors of the universe. See its many colors. You get to smell the breathtaking aromas surrounding you. You get to experience intimacy and sexuality. You get to feel the unsurpassed and limitless joy of procreation. You get to listen to the melodies of the universe through music, from the mysterious to the remarkable. You get to sing and dance. You get to share the breathtaking feeling of love with so many of your fellow cosmic lottery winners. Or one of my personal favorites, you get to experience interspecies love and have the opportunity to care for the littlest things. Like I said, it's your life, and if the evidence is to be believed, it's your only one. So do all that you can do to make it a more wonderful life. And do all that you can do to make it a more wonderful life for others, for therein lies the roots of true happiness. But I'll get into more of that in a later video.
I guess I'll be going home now. Wait a minute, wasn't that the end?
Now usually a section like this, why I made this video, is usually in the very beginning of a video. Here it's last. And with the music picking up, not to mention this weird background, something fishy's going on. Allow me to explain. The last movie I made 10 years ago, I was driven by the very aspirations of everything I told you so far in this video. And don't get me wrong, this is still very much the case. This time around, however, I also have an ulterior motive. When I felt the calling in the ministry to be a pastor, just about everybody I knew was like, it's the perfect job for you, man. Anyone who knows me knows that I will meticulously and endlessly debate a subject that I have a solid backing for. They said God picked me because he gave me one of the gifts from Romans 12 or 1 Corinthians chapter 12. The gift of teaching or the gift of persuasion. I don't know. But fact is, I do have a lot to say, and I'm thinking, why not say it? Hey, I'm in my 50s now, ripe for a midlife project. Not a crisis, a project. You see, I desire to do something with greater meaning and purpose for my own life, and for my legacy with my son and others. For a while now, I've been thinking about expanding this channel with vlogs much shorter than this video, with live streams and other videos to post up, to take it up as a serious project, possibly for years to come. But it was never more than, well, just that, a thought. That is, until not long ago. Remember how I told you that my son has his own YouTube channel that he actually earns from? Well, he's about to crack 100,000 subscribers, and to me, that's like holy wow. And get this, YouTube is going to send him a plaque when he reaches his 100,000 subscriber mark. Needless to say, I'm impressed. In fact, I was so incredibly impressed with my son that it set in motion a newfound ambition in me. An ambition to barrage against the monsters of procrastination and get the job done. Incidentally, I'm so proud to say that it was my own son that was my inspiration. I mean, how awesome is that? So here's the ulterior motive. As graciously and as humbly as I'm able, I'm asking each of you to subscribe to my channel. And if you like them, click like on my videos. And if you have anything to say, leave a comment. It's just a couple of clicks for you, but it would be a world of difference for me. I won't be asking you guys for money, and I've decided that I'm not going to annoy you guys with those annoying sponsors. All I ask of you is for your subscription. And if you really want to help me beyond subscription, when you watch a video, watch it to the end, or at least for as long as you can stand it. The YouTube algorithm favors videos that capture the viewer for a longer period of time. And don't forget to click like and leave a comment. The algorithm loves those things. I've rebranded this channel The Thinking Ape, and I intend to have quality guest speakers and quality guest hosts from time to time. I've already created 4 videos, and yes, they're much shorter than this one. They will be uploaded in 1 week to give this video a chance. Starting next week, I will be posting new content every few days, sometimes maybe even daily. And while my topics will cover religion and spirituality, there will also be many other topics that are of value towards society and humankind. Oh, and there's something else that's completely different. Once in a blue moon, you get a live musical number. I'm also a musician, and I'm telling you can't buy this kind of entertainment. When will the first live music be? I'll subscribe and I'll let you know in due time. Due time. You know, I like the sound of that. Announcement. One of the songs that will come in 2025 as a jam session will be called Due Time. Be sure to subscribe not to miss it. When I was thinking about how to sign off on each of my vlogs, I was thinking to myself, what am I going to say? Perhaps, thanks for watching, friends. Or how about, thank you to my viewers. It all sounded a little bit cold. Not sincere, you know. I want to create a connection with my viewers, but I didn't know what to say. I thought about it for a while and came up with something not half bad. Thanks for watching, my fellow humans. I mean, that's what we all are, as fellow human beings. But as much as I like it, I'm not going with that one exactly. I'm going to modify it. I decided to take it a scientific step further that better defines who we are more foundationally and is also more in line with the name of this channel. So allow me to say, for the first time ever, thanks for watching, my fellow apes. Until next time, stay loving, stay skeptical.